They're the doors. Now let me show you some windows. Windows clearly are essential to a property and its identity really. Various windows work with various architectural styles, and what we have in the showroom is a range of different windows to suit any house pre-1930s. If I show you what styles we have here, what you need to remember is that each style can be adapted. We can design it with colour, bar layout and specifics for your property. So this window is a flush casement. You probably guessed it's flush because it sits into the frame. After the 1950s, most of the windows that were installed, a lot of PVC windows, sit on top of the frame. They're called storm or lipped casements. So anything sort of pre that era really should be flush like this. There are variations of this theme, which I'll go on to and show you what they look like. But essentially, it's that slick look, everything fits within the frame, it just looks neat and tidy. This one has a particular design, it's called an inverted T-bar for obvious reasons. And what this does, it gives the window a little bit of design element without blocking your view. And this can work really well in sort of 1930s properties or Edwardian properties. I'll show you inside. So all the windows, even though they have very traditional looking handles and there's lots of choice, as we mentioned earlier, they all have multi-point locking systems built in. So that handle has a spindle that's built into a gearbox that's inside the frame, and then that frame will have a multi-point locking system. When I open the window, you'll hear a little pop, and that pop are the gaskets that keep the window sealed into its frame. So there's different ways of glazing a window. With most of our products, they're glazed from the inside, and the advantage of that is that we put the double glaze unit in from the room side, and then we hold it in position with a glazing cassette. Most old-fashioned windows would have been installed with that magical substance called putty, and putty was brilliant because it adhered to the glass and adhered to the wood, and it kept the water running off, which is why some of the windows we take out are 100+ years old and they're in great condition. Unfortunately, they're single glazed and they're really cold, which is why they need replacing. But with our systems, we have two options. One is the internally glazed product, which has this glazing cassette to hold everything in. That's security taped and pinned. It means that on the outside, there's a putty line finish machined into the frame and siliconed around the perimeter to stop any water coming in. And if there's a problem with the glass with this system, we can take the glazing cassette out and replace it with the new double glazed unit. The other option is what we find on listed buildings, which is this one. And this is where the glass has to be installed from the outside because of the requirements of listed buildings. What they need is essentially a copy of what the original was. And we have this window to do exactly that. So each of these units are individual double glazed units. What you can see here is a hand-finished putty line process. But the problem with using putty is that you can't put that next to a double glazed unit. It will break down the seal and the double glazed unit won't be suitable. So what we use is a hybrid silicone, which is hand applied, which looks exactly like the old-fashioned putty. And I think you'll agree that this is a pretty accurate looking replica. If I show you the inside of this window, it's fitted with monkey tail handles, monkey tail peg stays, and a deep section that mimics the original windows. Again, even though they look really traditional, all these handles operate a multi-point locking system that works off the spindle and the gearbox inside the casement. This window is treated differently. It's still a flush casement, but as you can see, we've got a bespoke lead work design in here. So one of the things that we like to do when we have an authentic looking product to replace is really take note of the detail. So what you'll see here is a 1/2 inch lead. It's pre-darkened. It has soldered joints. So really from the outside, it looks exactly like the original. We've even got dummy butt hinges on this window, and I'll come on to them in a second. I'll show you inside. So one of the tricks that we employ to make the glass look authentic is we don't just apply the lead to the outside, we also apply it to the inside of the outer pane of the double glazing. That means if you're in the room or you're outside the house, it looks authentic from both sides. I'll open this window and I'll show you what those hinges look like. So in here, the operating mechanism is what's called a spigot system. And what happens is the weight of this casement is transferred through a spigot that goes into that receiver, down through the sill and into the masonry below. And the benefit of that is that we can make absolutely huge windows that haven't got to drag on the side of the frame and essentially will sag over time. That won't happen with this product. In order to make it authentic, we've got these butt hinges, which are just dummies that we put into the side of the frame. So if you're outside of the house, they look like an original product. This one's fitted with some beautiful bronze furniture, and that's called an Avon design. Now this window is more like what you'll see in a sort of UPVC setting. So this is a storm casement that sits on top of the frame. These were only invented in the 1950s and picked up by the UPVC market because of their efficiency. We do a timber copy of that, and they're a very efficient unit. They suit a lot of properties. We have to find the right house to put them on, but when we do, we put dummy casements, which means we don't have a misalignment in the glass, so they look much better than the originals. As you can see from the inside, whether it's a flush window or a storm casement, they look similar. There's two more windows to show you. This one is called a cottage casement. Now, this is unique because where glass is at a premium in terms of you've got a small opening and you want as much light as possible, we can have a product that doesn't have a mullion that runs in between each casement. And what that means is, when I open this window, I can open this side too, and then there's a mechanism in here which allows me to open that window as well. And what you'll notice, there's nothing left in the middle. That gives us this great view, also increases the amount of glass on view and decreases the amount of timber that we use. Final window is over here. Now this one's called a deco casement. So a bit like the flush window, however, it's got some features on it that you would see in a typically sort of Edwardian or sort of 1920s, 1930s property, and we call this a deco casement. What you can see here is instead of being flush, it's got a transom detail that runs across here and a mullion detail too. And what that does, it gives the window a bit of relief. It means that the frame sits forward, the casements sit back, and as the sun goes over, you get some nice shadowing across the window. Essentially, it's the same in terms of its security and also with the putty line finish on the outside. And on the inside, you'll note it's exactly the same as the flush casement. This one's fitted with some reeded aged brass furniture, and we've got a Georgian bar layout up here. I'll move on to some sash windows next.